So this week we got brand new data looking at how much people earn in the UK. So strap yourself in, you nosy lot. We're going to find out how much you need to earn here in the UK to be rich. And we'll see what it takes to be in the middle, the top 10% and the top 1% of earners. And I think you might be surprised by some of these numbers.
This should be good.
Starting right in the middle then, here are the latest numbers according to the ONS who put all of this together. To be right in the middle, that's the UK median income. The current number is £28,008, which translates to a monthly paycheck of £2,334. Now, a quick caveat here already, this is the total for all workers, and this includes both full-time and part-time employees across all age ranges. If we break things down a bit further into full-time and part-time quickly, I think this paints a better picture for us. So to be right in the middle as a full-time worker, the median average pay is now £37,060, and the median average part-time worker is now £13,228. Just for reference, let me show you what these numbers were just 1 year ago according to the same stats, as this will lead us very nicely to what we need to discuss later. So just 1 year ago, going back now to April 2023, the figures were £34,963 for full-time workers and £12,480 for those part-time workers. Now those of you with a very quick math brain will work out that on average, in the last 12 months, those earnings have gone up 6%. Now, none of the data is obviously perfect, and this will only ever include employees who get paid through the usual PAYE tax system. If you make millions from your investment income and pay yourself a fortune, then you're not in this data. But I think it does give us a really good picture of where things are here in the UK.
How much money do you have to have before you're rich?
About 100.
Now, just on this data, let's dive a bit deeper, as not only do I want to know what the top 10% and top 1% of people make, but I also want to look at whether or not people are getting richer in real terms. Because as much as 6% sounds great as a pay rise, the cost of living in the UK has risen massively over the last few years. And let's also remember that £37,000 income is going to be very different if you live here in Manchester or if you live in the centre of London. Firstly then, let's look at the important point of whether people are actually being paid more. The part of the data that we really need to focus on is what's called real pay. And this is calculated when you take away the effects of inflation from your pay rise. So for example, if you were lucky enough to get a 6% pay rise last year, but inflation was 4.2%, which was actually the annual number of the Consumer Price Index including housing, this means that your pay in real terms is an increase of 1.8%. Now, this would still be a good thing, as it means you've got more buying power because your income went up faster than costs rose. But it is a good reminder that this might not always be the case. Take a look here at this chart showing real pay over the last 20 years or so. There's two lines on this one. The purple one shows us the rate of inflation, and then the blue one is the total pay in real terms. So, like I just said, it shows any pay increases, but then it takes out the effects of inflation. Now, there's a couple of interesting things to note here that stand out to me. Firstly, just before the global financial crash, things were ticking up pretty well. Overall, most people saw their earnings grow by more than the amount of inflation. I'll just add a line here at 0 so you can get a good picture. Now, anything above it means pay was going up in real terms, and anything below it means that people are losing buying power. Now, things get interesting after the crash as the UK enters into a long period where people lose their buying power year after year, until a bit of a bump in 2014. Then, if we look here furthest to the right, we see the effects of the global pandemic, with a sharp fall followed by a sharp rise in real wage increases. At the moment, we're in a phase of real wage increases. Whether you feel like this or not in your own life will depend on your personal circumstances. For example, public sector pay has typically been behind private sector pay. In fact, from 2022 to 2023, as one example, the increase in private sector pay was 7.7%, where public sector pay was just 3.7%. Now bear in mind that that's nominal terms, not real ones. Once you remove the effects of inflation from 2022 to 2023, which was 4.2%, you see that public sector workers get left behind. Also, it's worth adding that there will be plenty of private sector jobs with pay rises that were poor in real terms. The issue with average figures like this is that they don't tell the full story, but this is the best we have to work with. Now, jumping back to the numbers from the latest reports, let's lighten things up a bit and see what you need to earn in the UK to be doing very well. And once we've looked at that, I'll show you the kind of jobs that pay that kind of money and what else we can learn about high earners in the UK generally. So starting with the top 25% of earners in the UK, now for some perspective, this will be full-time workers now, and there are around 5.6 million people who fall into this category and above. There are roughly 22.5 million full-time workers in the UK out of the total 30 million currently employed. So it's about a 75 to 25% split. To get to these numbers, I've had to manually use the 2021 personal income survey data, then added on 2 years worth of inflation, and then finally added a bit to counter for the part-time workers. So bear that in mind. It might not be perfect, but it's the best I can work with, and I'll leave the links to all the sources in the description. Anyway, to get into the top 25% and above, I estimate that you'll need a current income of £49,972 per year, which is £4,164 a month, all before taxes, by the way, for anyone else. Now, as I said before, 5.6 million people in the UK earn that number and above. I'd love to know if you thought it would be more or less than that in the comments below. But now let's jump straight up into the top 10% because, let's be honest, you want to know what the number is, and you're all going to compare what you earn to this one and see if you're in the top of the country.
No, I'm not going to do that.
So, for this year, as I make this video, I estimate that the income you need is £71,894 to be one of the 2.25 million full-time earners. I will say that it might be a tiny bit lower, as this could be a bit of a slightly high estimate on my end, but it would be at least around that £70,000 mark if you want to allow some room for error. Again, breaking that one down as a monthly figure, all before any taxes, you will get to a very healthy £5,991. Again, I'd really love to know if you thought that this would be higher or lower than this, and also if you watched the video I did last year on this topic, as it's amazing how quickly inflation can raise the bar you need to be to get into this executive club.
What would you buy if you were rich?
Cabbages and lettuce and carrots.
Now, just before we jump into the 1% club, let me show you some more of the details from the latest job report to see where a lot of these high-paying jobs are coming from and what kind of people are in this group. Now, check this out on screen now. Here's the data showing the types of jobs and median full-time salary inside that type of job. So, for example, it's no surprise that right at the top here are chief executives and senior officials at a median income of £84,131. Now, bear in mind that as this is the median, this means there'll be a same amount higher as there are below that number. So you can imagine what some of the top people in this category are making. Now, other high-paying jobs in this sector are all pretty much management and directors, but you'll also find some public sector roles here too, like senior police officers there, with a median income of £59,053. Other sectors start to drop earnings down pretty quickly, but you can see the next highest paid group is anyone in professional occupation. So you start to see engineers, specialist medical professionals, and surveyors, etc. I think this is a good reminder that if you are quite young, or maybe you have children looking at jobs to train for, any kind of profession where you need to train and have a specialist set of skills, you'll probably do pretty well, or at least above average for the most part. Saying that, maybe things will change once our AI overlords take over and they no longer need us, but anyway. Now, on the lower end, we have a couple of different groups, and it's people in the service sector and the leisure sector, as well as people in care work and things like hairdressing. One thing worth adding here is that the lower paid jobs do tend to skew towards younger people, and that's something that we'll touch on now. So just before many of you start worrying that you might be too far behind or not paid enough, do bear in mind that salaries tend to go up as you age, and there is a strong correlation between age and what you earn. If you have a look here, for example, you can see that earnings peak around that 40 to 49 age group range, where the median sits much closer to the 40k a year mark. After this age group, you'll notice that gradually earnings tend to drop off a little bit as people start to retire and get a bit older. And then the same can be said for younger groups. You'll see that anyone in their 20s, for example, has a much lower median salary than the group in their 40s, and it won't be much surprise if you consider the years of experience that will come with hiring people a bit older compared to people just starting out. Also, location and where you live plays a huge role, as you might expect. If we look at England, Wales and Scotland, where we can see data, you'll see that there's a huge difference between average incomes in different areas. As you might expect, if we zoom into London, we can see the average weekly earnings of about 850 to 1,120 in these blue areas. Now, for reference, that would translate to annual salaries 44,200 and 58,240. But then if we zoom out and come closer to me in Manchester, we'll see some big differences. In Greater Manchester, for example, we see an average of £707, or just over £36,000 a year, but then you only have to go to counties just outside of the region to start dropping significantly. The Trafford area, for example, right next door, has an average weekly earnings of £615, or £31,980 a year. However, I do think it's worth saying here that although there are obviously big differences, there's no way to really understand the differences unless we dive into every part of life and the quality of living. I'd bet that plenty of people on lower salaries up here in Manchester have a significantly better quality of life compared to London, as housing costs and other major factors can easily eat into those bigger salaries. Anyway, interesting to look at, and feel free to look at that after the video is finished. Now, shall we finally take a look at the top 1%? All right, go on then. But just before we do, please do me a huge favor, hit the like button if you've enjoyed the video so far. And if you are new here, hit that subscribe button too. It is free and it will make my mum happy. Isn't that right, Mum?
What do you think it's like to be really rich?
Horrid. I'd rather be poor than rich.
Okay, the salary you need to be in the top 1% of the UK is, and again, I'm having to make some slight estimations with inflation, but I think it's around this number, £211,784 a year, or per month, a gross income of £17,648. Now, just for fun this time, let's run a quick after-tax calculation with a 4% pension contribution, and we get a take-home pay of £10,192 and a monthly tax bill of £6,726. Now, I'm not going to get the tiny violin out for anyone, but you can actually see how even a massively high salary like that could get eaten up if you increase your living costs along the way. One expensive mortgage, kids' school fees, flash cars, and some fancy holidays, and I bet, before you know it, a lot of that can be gone.
I feel sorry for them already.
Now, just one final thing on the subject of taxes. Here's something really interesting. This part is a couple of years old, but will probably be very close in terms of percentages. But of those earnings around 50k and above, which is around 15% of taxpayers, they take home 41% of all the income combined. But in terms of taxation, they account for 67% of all income tax. For reference, that tax was a whopping £130 billion in 2021, and that would cover the entire education spend, the whole annual defence spend, and still have some £15 billion left for some penny sweets. So make of that what you will, but if you earn a lot of money, you also pay a lot of money in taxes too. Now, the next time you see a high earner, give them a nice hug and thank them for their service. Now, as I've said before, I'd love to know if you thought these figures were a lot higher or lower than you expected and how they compare to where you're from, especially if you're watching from outside the UK. Let me know in the comment section below. Now, final thought, if you are interested in this topic, I've covered this on my channel before, and there's loads more details to discuss if you want to look at how the rich really earn their money. There's obviously loads of details I've left out here, and we can talk about this topic for hours. Up next though, I did this video a while back looking at how rich people invest, and I think it might surprise just a few of you. Anyway, I'll see you in the next video, and as always, happy investing.